Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first of the many 14 lessons. I was going to go many, but there's actually 14 for the Thrive Business and Admin course. Sorry, that was my alarm clock to remind me to record. So, I want to introduce our first expert, Sandra McGuire from Money Wellness. Sandra is particularly good at simplifying money conversations and really wants to normalize talking about money because I know there's a few of us, and I'm putting up my hand as one that finds it a bit ick to talk about money. And she's got all sorts of goodness that she's going to share with us today. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Irene. I suggest all of us put ourselves on mute, and then and if you've got any questions, pop them into the chat, and at the end we'll have a discussion. So over to you, Sandra.
Thanks, Jules, and thanks everyone for coming along today. All right, so
I tell you what, tell
I'm
us a little bit about yourself
all
first.
right.
Yes.
I actually wanted to talk a bit about money first, and then talk about
Okay,
me. I'm going to
great.
get into the ick before we get there. Uh, so I'll just share my screen, but certainly if you want to ask questions, we can keep an eye on the chat and other things. So just a minute.
Yes. I can interrupt you. Just concentrate on presenting, Sandra, and I'll let you know if there's anything that's time sensitive. Otherwise, we'll do questions at the end.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
So I'm Sandra, and today we're going to talk about money. And I'm going to keep it practical and real today because I want to show you money doesn't have to feel complicated or stressful or overwhelming. But let's start right at the start. Jules spoke before. There's often a lot of ick or uncomfortable emotions that come up when we talk about money. So I want you to take a moment. When you hear the word money, what comes up for you? What are you feeling? Is it stress, confusion, shame? A bit about you should know more, or you've embarrassed about stuff that you've done in the past, or you're a bit fearful. Think about what comes up because there's a lot of emotions attached to money. So, anyone want to give me a word or two, or a feeling that comes up for them?
Bettina has said, let it flow to me now. I love that.
Excellent. That's a good feeling to have. Let's manifest. Let's be positive.
Phoebe says choices.
Excellent.
I would agree with Phoebe that it's choices, but I would love to know how to make it flow to you better. What
Well,
else
I'll
we got
get
in there?
into that a little bit later. We are going to talk about giving our money direction
Yeah,
and
great.
knowing what that direction is. Choices, astuteness. Okay, there's some pretty good feelings coming up. So that's good.
And
So the
security for Mandy, which is also a good one.
security, yes,
Yeah.
that's one thing. So there's a lot of feelings, and they're very common that people have around money. And so one of the goals today is to understand how those emotions affect our money decision making process and give you some practical tools to feel more confident and in control. So as I said, we're not always logical when it comes to money. We're emotional. Um, and that's because we carry beliefs, stories, and habits around money that we've picked up often in our childhood from family and friends and people around us. And those beliefs and stories sit in our head, in our subconscious brains. And that means a lot of our decisions, and not just financial ones, are driven by past experiences or our emotional response, not logic or our rational brain. So, this is why we might avoid looking at our bank accounts, or we spend impulsively, or we feel like we're never good enough with our money. So I wanted to acknowledge this before we get into the detail and say it's something that we all do. It's normal to feel a little bit uncomfortable. But with awareness and a bit of support, you can turn around some of these beliefs and behaviours into habits that support you. Okay, so again, this is a bit about me. Jules introduced me before. I'm Sandra McGuire, a certified money coach and financial educator. And I equip people with the mindset, knowledge, and confidence they need to make informed money decisions that support their life goals. So I founded Money Wellness 2 years ago because as a former financial advisor and accountant, I saw that traditional financial advice is often expensive, complicated, and not suitable for everyone. So I wanted to make money education and support more accessible and empower people to understand it doesn't have to be hard or complicated, and you can take control of your personal finances. So I've got a thing for numbers. They just come naturally to me. And I describe myself a bit of a numbers nerd. I can take complex financial concepts and explain them in simple everyday language. And so I guess I see myself in that space. Before you go to see a financial advisor and spend thousands of dollars and get some complicated investment advice or super rollovers, in the space where I'm helping people manage their day-to-day finances, helping them understand and educating them and giving them a bit more confidence, and then maybe getting them to a place where they've got money to invest and they can see a financial advisor that we trust. So I offer one-on-one group coaching, provide some money education programs in schools, community groups, and I've also done some corporate wellbeing programs, and also with my clients provide practical tools and, as I said, help people get confidence and take control of their money. But I do need to just go through a little disclaimer that today the information is for educational purposes and general money coaching behaviour only. It's not financial advice. Always consider advice from a licensed financial advisor before making any large financial decisions. And we've got one of them in our network who's presenting later on, be it Amanda Thompson, who I know and trust and will look after you when you're at that stage.
Lovely.
All right. So as we said, that's enough about me. We've acknowledged there's a lot of emotions attached to money, and sometimes they're in the driver's seat when we're making our financial decisions. If it was just about setting a budget and sticking to it, we'd all be doing it, but we don't. So one tool I use with my clients to help them identify what subconscious beliefs may be shaping their behaviours is looking at the 8 different money archetypes. Now, they were developed by Deborah Price of the Money Coaching Institute, where I did my certification for a money coach. It's a bit like a Myers-Briggs personality assessment. You can do a quiz and it comes out with different personalities that may be active for you. So like, there's eight of them, but some of them might be a fool or an innocent or a tyrant with your money. And it just helps you sort of visualize which money type might be active for you and drives you and how you behave. So if you're interested in going a bit deeper, you can take the money quiz for free on my Money Wellness website after the session.
Right.
Okay. So now you've got awareness of why you may not always behave rationally with your money and sometimes you self-sabotage. We think about, well, what can we do about that? So one way to think about it is now we've got awareness that there's some other stuff going on up here when we're making our decisions. When we're looking at it, know that our first response will be from our emotions, our subconscious brain. So then we just slow down, take a moment, Deep breath, and then consciously move out of your emotions and then into our logical brain. And just ask yourself, is this decision in line with my goals and not just a short-term emotional response? So you get that bit of awareness that, yeah, there's some other things going on, and just take a pause, acknowledge that, and then just try and switch it into things that will serve you. So I wanted to start with the mindset, and as I said, give you some understanding about how our decision-making process works. But now we can get into some practical advice about managing your finances. And we described before, if we can take the emotion out of it, money is just a tool which gives us choices. And you should then align your money with your life goals and what's important to you, your values. So as I said, I like to keep it simple, and I'm going to start with the basics. I know we're all, successful women here owning their own businesses, but I had a moment working with a coach a while ago, and she made me realize that what comes naturally to me, and I think is common sense for everybody else, and they should know it, it's not always the case. And so I really am going to start at the beginning and with the foundations. So, let's just talk about money as a tool, and supporting what matters to you. So, the question I'm going to ask you is, what is important to you? Have a think about your goals for yourself and for your family and what you value in life. You know, you can write these down, but some of your goals might be in the short term. I want to go overseas and have a holiday. I want to renovate my bathroom. I want to start a new business. And then maybe long term, I've got a goal of paying off my mortgage in 10 years. I'm going to take a career break, or eventually I'm going to stop working, at the age of 60 or whatever. So we're thinking about our goals, and then we can, start aligning our money to it. But even deeper than that, I also want you to think about what is important to you and what values motivate you and how you wish to live your life. So we were talking before, some of the things that came up in the chat before when I asked about emotions. Some examples of values that you may have are security, or independence. You might have a value of health or family, adventure. So we're thinking about how we want to live our lives and what's, I guess the top three things that are important to you in that value space. So say you've got a value of security. So that might mean having enough money to eventually, and aligning your money to own your own home, and having an emergency fund, peace of mind if something goes wrong in the future. So that's how you're aligning your money with your value of security. Or having a strong family value might mean you want to have enough money to have experience together as a family, going away on holidays, or eating out with the extended family and spending time with them. So as I say, we're going deeper into, well, what's important to me and how can I direct my money to that? So I guess, yeah, that's important. If we can just think about money as a tool, or giving us choices. All right. So when we think about it, our money has three key jobs. Number one is to cover your basic living essentials, and these are called our fixed costs. So things like rent, mortgage, household bills, food, groceries, transport, etc. So these costs are referred to as our needs, things we need to live. The second job, or the second we often call them envelopes as well. Thing our money does for us is support our lifestyle now. So things like eating out or ordering Uber Eats, having nice clothes, entertainment, those sort of things. And these are the sort of the nice to haves or the wants with our life. And the third job our money should do is to provide for us in the future for things we want later on. And these are some of the goals, the longer term goals we spoke about. You know, it might be an overseas holiday or a new car, or, you know, you want to take a career break, retire from work, and even having some funds available for emergencies that may occur in the future. So that's what's often referred to as envelopes or buckets. You know, if you've read Scott Pape, the Barefoot Investor, he has, you know, a slightly different version, but some people call them buckets, some people call them envelopes. But look, you know, I had a boss at one stage who said, you can only spend $1 once. Right? So, you know, we've got our choices here that we have a look at those different envelopes and where we want to put our money. So if we just sort of get that concept of, you know, there's three things we can do with our money and categorizing it. And often, you know, number one, the fixed costs come first. We take care of them. Hopefully then we can, you know, be putting money aside for the future. And then whatever's left over, we can put in our fund money. But sometimes, you know, we do need to make trade-offs between the different envelopes. All right. So I've asked you to think about what's important to you and where you want to go. And we can design a strategy or, you know, a plan on how to get you there. But you can't set the plan without knowing your starting point. It's a bit like a GPS in your car, right? You put in a destination where you want to go, but before it calculates your route, it needs to know where you're starting from. So we do need to get clear right now on where your money is going, what you're doing and spending right now. So have a look at your bank statements for the last 3 or 4 months. What income's coming in after tax? What's going out? Do you have a surplus or a deficit? And most people are probably doing this in some form already. But look at each line on your bank statements, and hopefully, I would hope you've got your business account separate to your personal account. Some people mash them up. But have a look at what you're spending personally and categorize them into fixed, fun, and future. And then also have a think about, is this in line with my goals and my values? And if not, you know, you've got a value of security, you know, and so that means you might want to, you know, pay your mortgage off, but you're going off and buying a third pair of shoes. So, you know, that may not be in line with your values. And then you can think about, well, if that's not important to me, how can I, you know, review those sort of things. So I can provide you with a basic spreadsheet which helps you collate your numbers and categorize your spending. So this is your current position, where you're starting from. It may not be what you want it to be, and you may not like it, but don't be too harsh on yourself. This is just where you're starting from. And awareness is empowering. Once you know this, you've got clarity and you can start to take control. Because we're all working hard for our money and we want to make sure that we're making the most of it. All right, so now we know where you're starting from, we can design the map on how to get to your future destination and ensure you're, you know, enjoying the journey along the way. So as I said, you know, we're looking after our fixed costs, we're putting some money aside to the future. Then you do have a bucket of money, in your fun bucket, and you can sort of spend that guilt-free, knowing that, the other two are taken care of and you're enjoying the journey. Okay. So the word budget has a bit of a negative association for a lot of people. It feels a bit restrictive, like a diet, But I love this quote. If you don't tell your money where to go, you'll wonder where it went. So let's think about how you want to direct your money and call it an intentional spending plan instead of a budget. So you can take your actual spending and copy that, sheet and adjust it to what you want it to look like, intentionally spending your money. Some people might suggest, there's an old traditional thing which say spend 50% of your income in fixed, 30% in fun, and 20% for future. But, the percentages are totally up to you. And I had an interesting conversation with a client recently where we sort of reverse engineered his spending plan. So instead of saying, this is my after-tax income and this is what I can spend, he went, this is my goals and the lifestyle I want to live. What income do I need to earn to achieve that? He had a part-time job and a couple of side hustle businesses, so he could sort of adjust his hours and manipulate his income a little bit. But, that was certainly a different way of looking at it. So once you've got your intentional spending plan, there are other things you can do to help you get there. So you can think about having multiple bank accounts, one for your fixed costs, one for your fund costs, and a couple of different savings accounts for your future goals. You should automate to reduce some of the noise, your essential bill paying and any sort of transfers. You've got your income coming into your bills account. You've got all your utilities and mortgage happening automatically. So that reduces the time and the noise around there. The savings are transferring automatically into your savings account. And then you can put a bucket of money an amount into your fun account or lifestyle account and spend that sort of, guilt-free. And if, it runs out before your next pay, so be it. Or if you've got a little bit left over, you don't, you can put that into your savings or keep it for next year, next week. So you need to review your actual spending on a regular basis and sort of check in to see if it's in line with your spending plan. And there's lots of good bank or money management apps out there to help you classify your transactions and, keep on top of your spending. So set a regular time to do that. And of course, if you have a partner, have regular, money dates and make sure you're aligned with your goals and you both understand your cash ins and outs. Look, we know, within any partnership, generally there's one person who manages the money and, pays the bills and that sort of stuff. And sometimes the other one's involved. Sometimes they just sort of step back and, are completely hands off. But, make sure that you're aware of, if you've got joint accounts, what's going on. And as I say, you're aligned with where your future money's going. Okay. So we were talking before about our goals and our future money. So now we're talking about being very clear about our future money and what we're saving for. And if we're clear about that, we can put some dollars on it. But we also need to be clear about, well, when do I need that money as well? Do I need it in a year? Do I need it in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? So we've all heard the saying, we should save for a rainy day. But what does that mean? It's not very motivating. But, when we get into it, saving for a rainy day might look like, I want to have some emergency funds for things that come up, like household repairs and appliances, or, some medical costs or dental costs, or if the car breaks down. That might be a good um, motivation, a rainy day or emergency funds. Or I want to have some funds available as a bit of an income buffer for, say, 2 or 3 months in case you get sick and you can't work. You'll have enough funds to tie you over for a few months. You'll be able to pay the rent and mortgage and won't have to go into debt or load up your credit card or ask your family for money. So that's much more motivating than, having a rainy day fund. And you're more likely to put money into it, and you're more likely to leave it alone and not touch it if you know exactly what that money, future money, is going to be used for. So if you've got, some goals that you had previously, split them into, I'll need that money in 1 to 2 years into the short term. I'll need that in the medium term, 3 to 5 years, or longer term, 5 years plus. Because that time frame is very important. Look, and of course we've all got a long-term plan of, I was going to say retiring, finishing work, maybe going part-time, whatever it is. Look, at the moment we're trading our time for money. And at some stage, we want to stop working, but we're still going to need money to pay the bills, some of those essentials. So, eventually, if we stop working, we've got to have an income or assets that we can draw down on, in retirement, or we're reducing our work income. So I guess that's a longer term plan for most people. So as I said, the time frame of when we need the money is very important. For short or medium term goals, you can use bank savings accounts or term deposits. Because if you put $100 in, you'll get $100 back and a little bit of interest. It's low risk and conservative. And if you're using what the government call an approved deposit-taking institution, which most banks are and some of the smaller banks, the government will guarantee $250,000 of your money. So, if the Commonwealth Bank goes broke and you've got 100 grand in a bank account, you'll get that back. So again, but we know, bank interest rates are pretty low. So it's conservative but low risk. But that's good for the money that you need in the short term. And and look, so you can have it in an online savings account, earning a few, 3-4% interest, or you could have it in a mortgage offset. Sort of things. But to achieve your longer term goals, you need to have your money working harder for you. And that means investing. And don't be afraid of investing. A lot of women are scared of investing and think it's very risky because they don't understand it. But it's important you educate yourself, because the difference between returns on saving versus investing has significant impact on your funds at the end of the day. So this slide here, let's compare. If you were able to save $100 a week for 20 years, long term, and you had this in a bank account earning 4% interest, you'd have $158,936 at the end of the 20 years. But if you did the same, but instead of putting it in the bank, you invested in Australian shares, and on average, they've returned over 20 years 8.2%, you would have $261,680 at the end of those 20 years. That's a massive, $102,000 difference. Of course, it's due to the higher returns, but also, the compounding effect of interest. Money Smart website, which is a great source of government information, independent information, simple advice, calculators and things is really good. And you can, put all sorts of numbers in there. So you can see the big difference between saving and investing, which can make to your long-term wealth. But there's always that risk-return trade-off. If you want low risk, you have to accept slightly lower returns. And if you want high returns, you have to accept a little bit more risk. So what we're going to do next is I want you to understand what sort of risks there are with investing and how you can minimize them as much as we can. All right. So if we were to look at investing, what can we invest in? We can invest in shares, be it Australian or overseas companies. We can invest in property, be that residential, commercial properties, offices. We can do that directly or by property trusts, which are listed on the exchange, often called REITs or retail real estate investment trusts. You can buy commodities such as gold, crude oil, even coffee, and there's also bonds. They can be government or corporate bonds, a bit like a term deposit, which gives you a fixed return rate. And then, of course, we can buy cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, but they're very speculative, very volatile. So these types of investments are called growth assets. So you should get a return each year from these investments in the form of dividends or rent. And of course, we're hoping that the underlying value of the asset also increases and you get capital growth and make a profit when you eventually sell it. So the share market's a bit of a roller coaster in the short term. So that's why we don't put our short-term money into growth investment assets. But it's really good for money that you need longer term. So if we were to look at the average returns, as I said before, for Australian shares, that was 8.2% for the last 20 years. If we look at this graph, the blue line there is Australian shares. So you can see lots of ups and downs. So as I said, if we said it was 8.2%, that's an average. Some years you might get 11%, like last year. Some years you'll get 5%, or other years you might even get a -4. While historical returns are no guarantee of future returns, they say if you're invested for 10 years, you should expect 2 or 3 negative years. So while the ride is bumpy, as you can see, lots of ups and downs, the long-term trend is up. So if you're prepared to sit tight, saying, yep, I'm here for the long term, I'm going to ride out any of the market cycles, knowing that eventually my funds will go up when I need them. But of course, it's never nice when you get your super statement in the mail or other investment statements and you see the balance has gone down. But know that it's just a loss on paper. It's not a real loss until you actually sell it. So take the long-term view. I don't need this money for another 10 years. I'm going to leave it alone. It'll eventually come back and grow. So for example, if we go down to here, COVID came along in 2020. Once it became a sort of global pandemic, the share market had a bit of a panic, and you can see that the lines all go down there, and everyone's shares dropped by 20%, within a couple of weeks. But within 1 year, they'd all recovered and came back to where they started from. So yeah, so if we've left our money alone, well, it's gone down, it's come back up again. And look, and recently, we had the Trump announced all these tariffs. Everyone had a bit of a panic. Back in April, it dropped by 7%, but then, he either changed his mind or, the share market saw the noise in it, and it's within 2.5 weeks it came back. And we know that the media focuses always on the negatives, and you don't hear about, the recovery or the upside. You know, sort of the one-off, the big sort of lifetime ones, a bit like the GFC. The GFC, we dropped 35%, and it took 2 years to come back to where it was, but it did, eventually come back. So one way to reduce your risk, and the risk is the volatility, is to stay invested for the long term and ride out the short term sort of market cycles. And another way you can reduce investment risk is to diversify your investments. So that old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So instead of putting all your money in one company on the share market like BHP, you might want to consider different companies on the Australian share market, the US, and the overseas share markets, and investing in different types of assets. So having some shares, some property, some fixed interest bonds. So if one company or asset fails, it won't wipe you out. And you can do this pretty easily by using diversified EFTs, electronic traded funds, or managed funds. And they pool your money together and invest it across many different companies and sectors. But you pay, investment fees for those funds. EFTs are very cheap because they just automatically track the whole market. So you can get an EFT which says, put a tiny percentage of my money in every company that's in the top 200 on the ASX. And, if they go up and down, the computer, just follows them. But there's also many different types of EFTs to choose from. If you want to, you can specialize in different markets, industries, or locations. There's also diversified managed funds, which have investment managers picking individual company shares. Say they might have 20 companies they believe have high potential, but you pay more in investment fees for this management. But one thing to think about is one of your biggest investments is actually your super fund, and your super fund is already doing this. So I want you to know that you have complete choice about what your super funds do. While you can't withdraw your super until at least age 60 with conditions, and then you've got unrestricted access at 65. Right now, you have total choice about which super company holds your funds. And if you want to do it yourself, you can have a super managed fund, self-managed super fund. And right now, you have complete choice about where your funds in your super is invested. And if you don't make the investment choice for your superannuation, your super company will do it for you. All right. So we're talking about investing. We talked about staying in it for the long term. We talked about what we can buy. And now this is a bit more about how do you invest? So, we can invest using online trading platforms if you want to directly own some shares, or even EFTs. I'm not recommending any of these products, but this is a list, and there are many, many platforms out there. You've got ComSec, CMC Invest, which used to be ANZ, NAB, Stake, and others. You can go directly to investment companies which have their managed funds, like a Vanguard or a Macquarie or a Colonial. Of course, you can use share stockbrokers, and they'll completely manage your portfolio for you, but then charge you some pretty big fees to do that. And of course, you can go out and directly, buy property, or we've all got ownership in our own companies at the moment. And those properties can be residential or commercial offices, those sort of stuff. And what I really like at the moment is there's some really good, what they call micro investing apps. So you can start small and sort of get comfortable with investing. So things like Sharesy, Comset Pocket, Perla, Raise, eToro. And you can start with, really small amounts like $5, $50, and contribute small, regular amounts. It's a good way to start and practice. And, you put a little money in, you can see how it moves around and get comfortable with it. And, increase your knowledge and confidence. And then that gives you sort of a good base to then, if you want to start, moving bigger money. So, yeah, I touched on superannuation before. It is one of our biggest assets, and it is invested. So it's important that you know where your super is currently invested, what returns it's getting, and what investment fees you are paying. So look at your latest super statement or ring up your super company and ask. You have the choice. And as I said, the super company may have made the choice for you if you haven't done it. A lot of them just put everyone in a sort of default balanced diversified fund, unless you otherwise tell them. So what's sort of at the bottom of the page there, it is a little blurry. That's an example of what a diversified balanced fund may be, common in a lot of the super companies. They've got 29% in international shares, 23% in Australian shares. They've got some fixed interest, which might be those sort of bonds, term deposits and other things. A bit in property, a bit in infrastructure and cash. Some super companies also sort of have different investments for different age groups. So in their 20s, and people in their 20s, 30s and 40s might be in a high growth fund, and then in their 50s they switch them to a balanced fund, and then in their 60s they switch them to a conservative fund. So you can tell your super company where you want to be invested, and most super companies will provide a level of free advice to their members. So ring them up. They'll tell you what investment options are available to you. Assess your risk sort of tolerance and, take into consideration your age and your goals. And they might recommend an option for you, unless you have one in mind for yourself. All right. Okay, so that's most of the information I wanted to get across today. And of course, we've been asked to have some takeaways and some things to do after the training today. So what would be good if you wanted to get more awareness around your mindset and how your decision making works, take the money quiz, which is on the website, my website, moneywellness.com.au. And then you can sort of just be a bit aware about what emotions are going on and those sort of subconscious patterns that are coming up. And you can make some small changes to move from your automatic behaviors to things that are going to serve you. And of course, I said it's important to know your cash flow ins and outs right now, and I'll provide a template for you if you're interested in downloading that and putting your current cash flow into those three envelopes: fixed, fun, and future. All right. And so, once you've done your money template, filled in your money template and understand where your cash is going right now, that will give you clarity on your current situation and more control. And as we said, if you set a bit of a spending plan behind that, and that will eventually sort of build your confidence and manage your money and make sure that it's aligned with what's important to you. So if you want more support, the things that I offer, if you want to sort of go deeper in understanding your money, or me helping you, set up some systems and some habits, I've got different offers on my website. I've got single sessions or packages where we look at, a bit of a money map for you, where you are now, and recommend strategies to help you achieve your goals. Or we can get right into deep, and we've got a 6-session package called Money Mastery, where we look at, your situation, your money management systems, goal settings, and some financial education. And as a special offer to all our wonderful trainees today, and through the course, I'm offering a 20% discount. And I've recently just
Fantastic.
started a money wellness, what I'm calling Master Your Money community. I believe there's value in normalizing money conversations, having a safe space to talk about money, and as I said, sharing our wins, sharing our challenges, and knowing that, we think we're alone, but we're not. We often have the same sort of issues and conversations. So within the Money Wellness Master Your Money community, we've got a private and secure chat room where we can share our challenges and wins. You can ask me questions. I'll have a monthly live webinar where I present on the topic of the month. We have Q&As. And so for the community that's beyond wisdom, like we're doing now, and $26 a month.
Fantastic.
And I'm also passionate about financial education. So I love speaking at community groups, schools, workplaces. If you know someone who'd find this information useful, I'd love to connect. And I'm always posting regularly on socials. So connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook. So I appreciate everyone's time today, and hope that there's something new in there that you've learned. And I'd love to hear any of your questions or reflections, and we can turn off the recording if you want to, keep those private.
Yeah, I will. Okay, so thank you. Hang on.